Back in the saddle, Steven Psihogios of NorthStar Bets joining me today. Talk some more puck. Stevie, the Toronto Maple Leafs last night were in the city of brotherly love. Sean Couturier wasn't feeling any brotherly love at all from John Tortorella sitting in the press box, but the Flyers responded with 3 first period goals to a 4-3 victory over the Toronto Maple Leafs. Stevie, I'm going to give you a statement. The Leafs got punched in the face by the Flyers and couldn't respond till it was too little, too late. Was that accurate in assessment last night's game?
Yeah, that was. They all of a sudden they tried to pull the game out of their rear ends in the third
Mm,
period, but it doesn't work like that. You got to, especially against a team fighting for points. They're going to see it tonight against Washington too. Like these
mm,
are teams fighting for points, trying to make the playoffs. And Toronto, one thing I will say about the Leafs, and then I'm going to give them a little bit of slack, and then I'm going to rip into them. But the thing I'm going to say about the Leafs is that you know what, their fate has already been determined. They're going to play a Boston or a Florida in
mm.
round one, two teams that I think are actual hockey teams. This is where I'm going to rip into the Leafs. You have a squad here that honestly is just a collection of a few individuals, and everyone else is expendable. And if I know it, they know it. And this is, I think, the problem with the Toronto Maple Leafs is you can't build a team with just 4 guys who have job security, and everyone else knows as soon as I start playing well, I'm going to get priced out. You don't believe me? Ask Zach Hyman. Look at what happened to that guy. And he's going to score 50 goals this year. But as soon as he started playing well, the Leafs couldn't afford him. So that's the issue with this team is that, sure, you can play well for the Leafs, but it's mainly for personal benefit because you are not going to be on the Leafs by the time that your contract is up because they can't afford to keep you.
Yeah, no, look, Stevie, I knew Philly was going to come out and have a big response because their captain got benched. They was not happy with it. But Torch is a guy who knows how to motivate his players, knows how to push the best out of his players, and we've seen that this year. This team is missing some of their best defensemen in Rasmus Ristolainen and Jamie Drysdale, who they just got from Anaheim this year as well. This team is fighting for their playoff lives. They've gone through a whole lot of stuff this year, and the fact the Flyers are basically a year ahead of schedule. This was a team that I suspected going into the season would be another rebuilding year, get a high pick. They moved off Sean Walker at the deadline, but here they are, still in a playoff spot, still trucking along. And the Leafs have to expect, yes, their fate has been determined, but you can't let these bad habits continue to creep on in as the season progresses. Because, like you mentioned, when you go to a Boston in a game one, or you go to a Florida in a game one, yeah, Philly can punch you in the mouth pretty good, but those two teams have knockout power, right? They will knock you out and you will not be able to get up. So I believe that the Leafs, like you mentioned, I agree with everything you're saying. There's a 4-line team now. Ilya Samsonov did not have a good night last night. You cannot have a performance like that from your number one goalie in the playoffs and expect to win. I wonder if there's like some sort of, like you mentioned, there's fate has already been sealed and they're kind of letting their foot off the gas pedal.
Yeah, 100%. But they
Mhm.
can't be too lackadaisical because Tampa Bay's red hot right now. You talk about a team that made some moves at the deadline and is
Yeah.
really, feeling re-energized. Tampa Bay, they go into Vegas, they score 5 goals. They've won a few games here. You added Dumba. Duclair's been really good. I believe he's got
Mhm.
3 goals in 4 games for Tampa Bay. Gives them some speed. That was one thing about Tampa Bay that maybe a lot of people suggested was they need to get faster. They're a bit of an older team now, but you had a guy like Declare, and he adds instant speed. Dumba's a guy that when the games matter the most, he elevates his game.
Mhm.
Tampa Bay only 5 points back of Toronto right now. That's not an insurmountable hill to climb with 14, 15 games left for both teams. So I'm not going to rule them out. But again, with the Leafs, it's just it's frustrating for the fan base.
Mhm.
But the team it starts from the top. They don't have that will to win. They might say after they lose, oh, we really wanted to win and do it this year. But until I see it, how many times do we have to see this team get disrespected? They've been disrespected multiple times this year. How many
Yeah.
times do we have to see that? And through the Matthews, it comes to a point. Could you imagine if the scripts are flipped here and Philadelphia, it's John Tortorella or excuse me, the Maple Leaf coach benches their captain, John Tavares, or who
Ouch.
hasn't been good
No.
for long stretches of this season, by the way.
Hey,
Can
look,
you imagine if that happened here? What would happen, Justin?
No, absolutely. Look, I think John Tavares is warranted to be benched at times this season, right? But as I've mentioned before, and I've said numerous times, the Toronto Maple Leafs are an organization that the players run it. They've been given everything they've ever wanted, right? Every contract they want, everything in their contract demands they want. That's why Mitch Marner is going to get exactly what he wants from this organization because they feel that they'd rather keep these guys than make the tough decision and face some sort of backlash from the fan base or whomever or the media to trade one of these guys. Um, the Leafs are going to be doomed. I think that this team right here, like we said, it's not a Stanley Cup caliber team, right? For the moves they made, their defense core is not very good. It's not playoff caliber level, Stevie. It's not of the likes of any semblance of a Stanley Cup winning defense core at all. I think Morgan Riley is a good defenseman. He's not a top 10 defenseman in the NHL. I could see him more as a number 2 or a 1B on a Stanley Cup winning team, but not the lead dog on a defense core. Austin Matthews has struggled since Mitch Marner has not been in the lineup, and we've seen that. And it's talking about Matthews again, he rang it off the post yesterday. He's really struggling of late. Is that more so to do with teams loading up on him, or is that just the absence of Mitch Marner?
Well, look, they're not playing the Ducks and the Coyotes every night. Like these
Mm,
are two. He was really lighting up these really bad teams. They were playing.
yeah.
They scored like 9 goals on the Ducks. He scored 3 goals in 15 minutes. Yeah,
Mhm,
okay, great. Oh, you had 2 chances against Boston to do something, and again, this guy disappears. Like when the moment gets big, the lights they're too bright for Austin Matthews. Unfortunately, we've seen it time and time again. How many times? Like, do we
mhm.
have to? I feel like at this point I'm playing the hits, but people will tell me, he's scoring all these goals. That's great. That's fantastic. I hope you really enjoy those 2 goals against the Coyotes, or when he gives the Ottawa Senators 3 goal performance. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, it gets to a point where we watch this, we see it with our own eyes. We can see that this guy, he doesn't have that Nathan McKinnon dog. Nikita Zadorov, I want the dog. That is a player who's won a Stanley Cup because he's willing to go to the dirty areas to score a goal. We've seen that guy chuck a helmet at another dude. Like
That's
we
true.
the
Yeah.
guy verges on insanity at some points, but it's a will to win. Connor McDavid, you see when he gets frustrated, he snaps his sticks. This is we've seen that will to win. No, the temperature never rises with Austin Matthews. It never does. And to your point, this team's in even more trouble now because they're playing very poorly with Mitch Marner out. Now,
Yeah.
this is what is it? This is Mitch. If I'm Paul Marner, I'm laughing right now. This is exactly
Price goes
this
up and
season.
up and up, right?
This season couldn't have gone any better if I'm Paul Marner. Like
Absolutely.
I feel like I hate to feel like I'm piling on the Leafs here, but that's eventually you have to come to grips with what you're watching with your own 2 eyes. Like you just can't just watch it and ignore it anymore.
Let me ask you this because you brought up Nathan McKinnon and Connor McDavid. Kucherov has been electrifying the last little while, but McDavid again, another 2 points against Montreal, a beautiful goal, another assist. I think he's still on pace. Yeah, he's on pace to get 102 assists in 32 goals, excuse me, for 134 points. The Oilers were dead last in the standings in November. McDavid was hurt. He came back. He was what on like the top, not even the top 50 of NHL scoring, and now I think he's going to win the Art Ross Trophy this year. What would be a bigger comeback? The Oilers coming from the dead last in the standings to second in the Pacific, potentially going to win. I don't think that's going to happen, but second in the Pacific and getting home ice advantage in the first round, or McDavid catching McKinnon and Kucherov and winning the Art Ross Trophy.
I'm gonna say it's what the Oilers have done as a team because that was wild. Like that was
Yeah,
like a terrible start. And McDavid, I thought he missed more games. He only missed like 2, 3
yeah,
games to
two
start the
games.
year. Like he played hurt, but he
Mm,
actually hasn't missed as many games as I thought he did. So it was more McDavid's poor play slash injury riddled play that caused the slow start. But this guy's come on like a wrecking ball, and I mean it directly correlates with Edmonton's success. So they kind of go hand in hand. But I'm going to say what Edmonton has done as a team, they've really turned it around. The defense has been very good. You look at expected goals against, Edmonton's got one of the best marks in the league. They've been rock solid in front of Stuart Skinner, and it's I'd say the biggest catalyst for that, aside from McDavid just turning it on, has
mhm.
been the revert. It's been Skinner reversing course and having a really good season. So I think if you're looking at Edmonton, you could either one is a good choice because this is like watching DK Metcalf race back and tackle Buda Baker.
Pretty
It's like
much.
someone's gotta like gift that. But that's what this is with McDavid. He's chasing him down, and he might catch him. Not even at the goal line. It might be at the 10-yard line here. He might even have time to grow a lead on these guys the way he's playing.
And I think if McDavid does that and he catches McKinnon, you can wrap up another hard trophy for him as well because that will be his. The Oilers are currently plus 700 on NorthStar Bets to win the Stanley Cup. A couple teams below them, your Boston Bruins and the Vegas Golden Knights. They're both tied with odds. However, Vegas is in a dogfight to even make the playoffs, Stevie. So, do you think that they will make the playoffs? And then, would you bet on the Golden Knights at plus 1100 to repeat as Stanley Cup champions?
I'd rather bet on Vegas to miss the playoffs than bet on them to win the cup. I'll be flat out honest with you right here, and I'll tell you why. Eh, Everyone's saying, "Oh, here goes Vegas gaming LTIR once again." It's all fun and games until you actually have to start playing the games. And
Mhm,
Vegas's defense has been brutal, and the goaltending hasn't been much better. They give up 5 goals again last night. I think that's like 3 of their last 4 games now, or 4 of their last 5. They've given up 4 or more. It
mhm,
hasn't been pretty. And Minnesota's playing better hockey. They've had a bit of a soft schedule, but they're playing better. The Blues, it was a tough game last night against the Avs. They didn't quit. They played a pretty good game. Jake Neighbors is starting to come along. Like it's all fun and games until you start looking at games, 75, 76, and you're only 2 points up on Minnesota. So Vegas, they've learned this lesson once already with LTIR. It worked for them last year, but everything really has to go right. And when you can't buy a save and your defense starts to slip off,
yeah.
it's hard. It's very difficult to win games in this league. So I would rather bet Vegas to miss the playoffs and win the cup. But plus 1100, there's a lot. Not only do they have to make the playoffs, they now have to go on the road essentially
Mhm,
every single series and do it. And we know the difference between playing at T-Mobile Arena versus Vegas having to go on the road. T-Mobile has been one of the best home ice advantages. To not
mhm.
have that in the playoffs makes a big difference, especially now. Hey, we thought that Edmonton might be that team that's on the road for the entire playoffs, but it's going to be Vegas. And if Vegas has to play Edmonton in Edmonton, that changes things.
Yeah, no, look, as a Canucks fan as I am, I'm hoping and praying that Vegas slips, right? Or even the Canucks are able to get the second seed in the conference and to face a team like Nashville, who again is 8-2 in the last 10 games. Great story this year, but I still do not want to play Vegas in the first round. I do agree with you though. I think that if the Oilers and the Golden Knights match up in a first round series, that's going 7 games. But the Oilers are winning because the Oilers are a better team. Because under Knobloch, since he's come in, they've played so much better defensively. Vegas this year is a plus 14 goal differential. The Oilers have a plus 47 goal differential, right? And as you mentioned, the Knights are 15, 14, and 5 on away from T-Mobile Arena. So I think Vegas is in trouble. I do think they make the playoffs. I think they still have a game in hand on Minnesota and still 3 points up. So I think Vegas gets in. But I do think it's a situation like remember Chicago back in I think 2011 where they were just got in the eighth seed and then they played the Canucks in the first round and got knocked out. But they will be there. I think you cannot underestimate the Vegas Golden Knights just yet.
No, no, see, you can't underestimate Vegas with a full roster, but with the roster they're putting out right now, because of the
Yeah,
situation they're in, this isn't okay. It's easy to look at the opening day playoff roster and say, "Man,
yeah,
this team is stacked." But you look at the team they're putting out on a nightly basis right now; it's
mhm,
pretty good. It's not bad. It's
yeah,
not as dominant. They got to play by the same rules as everyone else does right now. Nobody says if they get to the playoffs, they obviously can milk that advantage that they created for themselves, but they can't do that right now, and that to me is a big issue, especially late in the season. Now
mhm,
you can't really give guys rest if they need it or time off because of the issues that creates with calling players up.
mhm.
This is when you start to feel those effects, especially as a team coming off a Stanley Cup victory. They played a lot of hockey last year. So this is where I worry about a team like Florida too. You get late in the season,
Mhm.
sure everything looks good through 50, 60 games, but they logged a lot of extra minutes last year, both those teams. I want to see how they both hold up.
I think Florida's more equipped. I think they have the bigger horses in the race. I really like what Florida's done. I think Vegas. Please avoid the Canucks in the first round. Please, I do not want to play Vegas in the first round. And we'll see what happens. Like I said, it's only what, April 22nd, I believe, the start date of the playoffs. So around a month away, Stevie. Before we get you going, let's go back to the Leafs. They're in action tonight in Washington, D.C. Right now, they're at minus 137 on the money line. The over-under is set at 6.5. Stevie, quickly, what are some of your best bets for that game and the rest of the slate in the NHL?
I like the over. The Capitals have been scoring all of a sudden, and both teams are playing their second game in as many nights. So you could have tired legs here from both these teams, and potentially between the pipes. Or sorry, Washington's playing their second game in 3 days. They played on Monday. So I will take the over on 6.5 goals. A total. Give me Washington at home as an underdog at plus 118 with the rest advantage. And also, you have to consider the fact that they really need these 2 points. This is
Yeah.
a big 2 points for Washington. They're in the thick of that race for that final wild card spot. And Ovechkin, he's kind of turned it on a little bit lately. I think he can get that group going, and they can come away with a win against the Leafs at home tonight.
Absolutely. I think another desperate team that's coming in, Ovechkin scoring goals. They just beat my Canucks on the weekend. It's going to be an interesting game. It's going to be on TNT in the States too, so a big crowd will be watching. Stevie, thank you so much. We'll talk on Friday where I'm sure we're going to tee up McDavid versus Matthews, Saturday night, hockey night in Canada in Toronto. So take care, my friend. We'll talk to you in a couple days.